That's right. I'm here with Mary O'Connell, our 3PL expert here at FreightWaves. Mary, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Anytime. Thanks for having me, guys.
So, Mary, we're jumping into freight audits. What does this mean, and how can someone prepare for this? Let's just jump into it.
Yeah, so freight audit is basically nothing that's a brain busting novel concept. Basically, freight audit is you get your invoices that come in and you say, okay, well, I agreed to pay $500 for this load, but the carrier's charging me $800. Where is that extra charge coming from? Now, naturally, you're going to have, if you have like detention or a driver unload or something that you weren't originally anticipating on having, but ended up having just by sheer oops, it happened. You'll have that on there, but you want to double check the audit process, double checks that what you're being charged is actually correct. So if you did have a driver detention and a driver unload, then yeah, your invoice is going to be higher than $500. But on the flip side, if you have a shipment that you should have been paid, it should be only $500 and you're getting charged $800 for it. Well, then you will, then you're going to be like, whoa, why am I getting charged $800? And then usually you can contest that back with the carrier and then you get that $300 back. So typically when you're a 3PL, having that freight audit and payment service is really a better way to check and make sure that your customer's not getting overcharged, the correct, and the LTL side, your correct discount and base pricing is applying, the accessorials are applying correctly. They're not just charging residential delivery because why not? So it's kind of one of those where it just helps to go back and double check. And there is typically an upfront cost that goes with it because, you have to hire people to, audit and go through all those invoices individually. But most of the time, if you ever want to know if it's profitable, just take a month's worth of invoices for one customer and carrier pair and go back and see how many times you were incorrectly charged. And most of the time you'll pay for it. You'll pay for an employee in the first month alone.
By the way, good to see you. When folks hear the word audit, I think a lot of times they get freaked out, right? And they're like, oh my God, we're being audited. This is a big time problem. But audits can really work in your favor, as you were mentioning, by kind of going and finding those charges that were lost and almost paying for themselves if you get them done correctly. If you are the carrier that's gone through this audit and you found out, hey, I was charged things a little bit wrong, how do you now go about going back to the people who were charging you wrongly and saying, this is what happened when I found this audit. I went through a third party to do this, so I know that it's being fair. And then how do you do that, ask for your money back, but still kind of preserve that relationship without making it seem like you wronged me, I want my money now?
It's actually super easy. So the best part is if you have a 3PL, use your 3PL to go through it, because the 3PL pretty much gets nothing out of that relationship except doing good by everyone. So all you really do is, when I used to do it, I used to just I had a rep, like an accounting rep for each different carrier, and I would send them a list of invoices saying, these were billed at this and should be billed at this. Can you please correct it? And usually within a day or two, I would have corrected invoices, and they're like, yeah, sure, no problem. Because as long as you come, again, you make a lot more friends with sugar than vinegar. And so if you just sit there and very nicely say, hey, per what I have, which is usually like a pricing tariff or an email or a quote that you might have gotten, as long as you have that and send that over to them and say, this shipment is for this quote. It says it's only $500, but you're charging me $700. What's the situation? Then they'll say, oh yeah, you're right. It should be $500, or, oh no, unfortunately, due to this reason. Basically, whoever has the supporting documentation wins.
And Mary, of course, when we're looking at potential downshifts in the market, a lot of folks are going to be looking at, hey, where can I cut costs? This doesn't sound like this is an area to really kind of start eliminating or just getting rid of, because it's going to be driving efficiency. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I would not cut your freight audit and payment team. If anything, now that the market has downturned, carriers are going to be trying to see what they can get away with more, and they're going to try to tack a couple extra $100 on here, on there. And it could literally be someone sitting there going, okay, well, they charged a residential delivery for this, but let me actually go through and just Google the address and see if it's residential. That was the biggest offense that we found more often than not, was that they were charging getting limited access or residential delivery when in fact it was like just a dock warehouse that they had to back up into. So it's something like that where it might seem counterproductive, but it really helps manage your overall transportation management spend with your customer. And it really goes a long way to like build that relationship with the carrier and the customer. I know it seems counterintuitive to go back over to a customer or to a carrier and be like, hey, we're going to build our relationship, but please stop overcharging me. It just kind of sets that tone that like, hey, you need to make sure that you're on top of it. We're watching, everyone's watching, like just be better. It just makes everyone a little bit better.
So if you're working in a 3PL and maybe you're unfamiliar with the process of auditing, what are some of those things that you should be looking for maybe in your billing that you're doing or in the money that's coming back to you where you're saying, you know what, this could be a little bit of a red flag. Maybe now I need to look a little bit closer, or you need to flag this for somebody else to take a look at?
I would say that so typically it's really tricky with a new customer that you might have just brought on because you aren't familiar with their network, you aren't familiar with what their invoices typically look like. But some of your more established customers, you have that familiarity, you know about what they should be spending every month in transportation, just in transportation spend. So when you come across some of those months where it's higher or some of those quarters where you're like, man, this is very atypical, like they're up maybe $10,000, $20,000 more than they would usually be this time of year. And I know that the last few years we've had some really strong spot network, so rates have been inflated, but that's where you see that it's higher than what it should be, and you say, okay, I need to just double back, cherry pick a couple invoices from different carriers and just go back and make sure that they were billed correctly. It is about an extra hour's worth of time, but it's just kind of worth that peace of mind to go, okay, well, they truly are just spending more. Maybe they are doing more expedites. Maybe there is a bigger problem behind the scenes. But on that turn, you can, if you see that they're spending more and it's valid charges, you can go back to your customer and say, hey, did you know that you're spending $20,000 more per year than you like per quarter? Like right now you're up over that much. So what's going on? What can we fix? It kind of works both ways where it does take a little bit more time on the 3PL side, but you can turn it back and say, hey, customer, what's going on? Why you got some problems here? And, you can also make sure that like, it's just still that partnership and that helpful relationship to everyone involved.
And Mary, I can only imagine that something like this can also be a deterrent to a lot of individuals because I know sometimes human nature, a lot of people want to see what they can get away with, and if they find a little bit of a weak spot, they'll keep exploiting it. So I'm sure this sounds like an area where that can really kind of deter a lot of that activity and thought process. If people want to reach out and find out more about what you're getting involved in, what you're doing, how can they do that?
Yeah, just go to freightwaves.com/checkcall. You can subscribe to the newsletter. You can get all the podcasts that we have available there. You can find us on anywhere that you have your podcasts, like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can find me on LinkedIn. And if you really want to get spicy, you can slide into those Twitter DMs at MaryO_119.
Awesome, Mary. Well, thank you for joining us this morning. Go catch yesterday's episode of Check Call for the latest and greatest in the 3PL space. Right now, we're going to take another quick break, and we'll be right back in just a few minutes.